Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to be sharing the Power Poppy Poinsettia and Pomegranate digital stamp set. I do have this printed out on an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of express blending card. At the end of the day, this is going to be made into an art print. It'll be scanned and printed out on a fine art paper, but I did need the express blending card in order to color in my image today. Now, before I get started on this, I want to talk about this background. This is not my background. Yes, I did this background. However, the technique is not mine. It actually belongs to Amy Schulke over at Vanilla Arts. I will have this link down below. This came from her TONIC class. This is a technique that you can use on tons of different projects. That class is totally worth checking out. It is more Halloween themed. However, at the end of the day, it's really about learning this background technique and learning how to color in class, which is always helpful. I strongly suggest you go check that out, but I did want to mention that because I'm not going to show you how to do this background. I really feel that this is something that you should learn from her workshop, just like I did. So again, link down below if you're interested in checking that out. That being said, we are going to go through this coloring today. I have a more detailed, full real-time video available over on Patreon if you're interested in that. I will also have that link down below. Definitely go check that out, folks. I have tons more for you to learn over on Patreon than what I can offer you here on YouTube. It is definitely worth it, and I try to make the prices as reasonable as I possibly can. In most cases, you're talking $2 a video with tons of bonuses and extras, and you can't ask for more than that. One last thing to note before we dive into the project here is I did do this background first because this technique requires a lot of colorless blender, and I did not want the background to bleed in to the edges of my images. So I had to make sure that I was coloring up to the edge of the images and blending that out and then doing the technique, but I had to make sure that that colorless blender wasn't getting too close to the edge of my images. Otherwise, it was going to bleed inside of it. Some of it is okay, like on the pine. I can address that later, but I did not want it to bleed on the inside edges of my poinsettia or the pomegranates before I had a chance to color those. So keeping that in mind, now we can get started on our project. So I'm going to start coloring in this poinsettia. Now, typically poinsettias have these really fine veins that run up the center of them and they branch out towards the edge of the poinsettia. However, I'm not going to color that in that way today. I'm really going to play up these lines that are illustrated within this image, and I'm starting with my BV23. I went right up the center there. Now I'm coming in from the edge of these petals towards the center of the petal, and I'm knocking out one side first before I start down the center of that. It kind of helps keep my lines really clean so everything doesn't start bleeding in together. You definitely don't want that. Now, while I am going for a darker look overall, I don't want these to look like little blobs here and there. You definitely don't want that. So I am making sure that I either add the shade from on the side of the petal towards the inside and then add the shading from the inside towards the outside, or I'll add the shade from the inside of the petal going towards the outside and then work from the outside in, keeping in mind where each of those lines fall as I add them. Now, on this petal that is folded over, I'm keeping my lines really thin or really fine. I don't want to add too much shading up underneath where that fold is, because otherwise you're going to lose the definition in that petal. And keep in mind, folks, although we're going to be coming in with colored pencils here later, there's only so much that we can fix with a colored pencil. So it's better to go light and add more later than go too heavy right out the bat, and then you can't take it away. That's always a bummer. It will ruin your project. After I was done with that BV23, I'm coming in with that R29. I'm going right over the top of that BV23, bringing that out a little bit more. Now, I am playing up some of the bends and the folds on the edges of these petals. I did not add a BV23 to all of those bends and folds, but I am going to bring in this R29 in some of those and add them there because I do want some more color variation in my coloring, although I am going pretty dark, pretty heavy with these colors, and it's kind of hard to see in the video. In real life, I can see that color variation after I have all of my colors colored in. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick is there's a big difference between coloring in larger images like this, because this is 150% of the default size on this, and smaller stamped images. When you're coloring in larger images, you kind of have to keep that in mind. You want it to take off as smaller chunks at a time, folks. You don't want to work on it too much at once, because you don't want all of your Copics to dry back before you can go over them with the next color. You need that blend in order for everything to look like it should look. So in this case, I started with 2 petals at once. Now, if that's too much for you, definitely slow down and go with 1 petal at a time. I can color fast enough that I don't always need to do that, but even at that, I'm still taking smaller portions at a time, not just for my blend, but also to kind of keep everything in order, and so I'm not getting ahead of myself and making coloring mistakes, because again, I don't want to A, have to start this over, and B, I don't want to ruin the whole project. So I am definitely taking smaller portions at a time. And if you're new to this, only go 1 petal at a time. It will help a bunch with your blending. Now that was the R27. I went over that BV23 and the R29. Now I'm bringing in that R24. I want you to look and see how much white paper I had left. It's not a whole lot. I don't want very stark or very bright highlights on this. I don't need them to stand out. I'm going to talk about that more when I get to the colored pencil work. But while I'm Copic coloring, I definitely have to keep that in mind, because I'm not looking for bold highlights here, folks. It's totally not necessary. Now I'm going to get started on these pomegranates, and all of them are pretty much the same. This is going to seem kind of tricky for most folks, but pay attention. I'm going in with that BV23. I went in my darkest shadow areas with that. Now I'm bringing in that YG21, and I'm going from the top towards the bulb of this pomegranate and bringing that down. Then I bring in that YG03 and go right along where the narrowest point is on the top of the pomegranate. Add that to it, and then bring that YG21 back in to blend that out. Now I'm coming in with my R17. I'm going over the top of that BV23 and just a little bit past that. See how much white paper I have left? I definitely need that, because I'm going to be bringing in that R14. When I bring in that R14, I'm not going to go all the way up to that YG21, but I'm going to get as close as I reasonably can without going into that YG21. It's kind of hard to see here in the video, but I definitely don't meet it up all the way, because now I'm going to bring in that YG21. YG21 is a little bit lighter than R14, so I need the YG21 to be on top in order for those to be a good blend. Blending other colors like that can be scary, and in this case, they're complementary colors, so they could turn out like mud. But if you take the right approach and with the right kind of tones, it'll work out perfect every time. I want to add some more details to these pine that are sticking out here, and in order to do that, I'm bringing in my Stettler pen. This is a darker green Stettler. I am adding the detail to the shape of this image that is illustrated in the shape of this image with the Stettler. I'm also bringing that out in very light flicking motions from the center out. I'm going to go over this later with colored pencils and Copics, so that it is going to kind of mute some of that back, kind of tone some of it back. It won't be so stark and scary like it looks right now, but this is definitely a great technique to add just a little bit more detail in there, just enough of those hard edges that it kind of helps add more detail to it. Now, when I filmed this, I thought I had recorded all of the rest of this. I did not, so I printed off another one, and I'm going to show it to you here, and then we'll finish off on our original project. I'm coming in with the YG97. I'm going in where I feel my darkest areas are going to be. Now, markers have a fatter tip on them, so you're not going to be able to stay in those lines. That's fine. You're totally not going to be able to notice that on the finished image, and I'm going to show you a comparison comparison here in just a moment so you see more of what I'm talking about. When I was done with that YG97, I'm bringing in the YG95, going over the top of that YG97, extending it out a little bit. You can see that I still have some white area on this image left. That's perfect. We're going to be bringing in a YG93 here in just a moment. But I'm also adding extra flicks with the YG97, 95, and the 93 within this pine, so it makes it a little bit fuller, so there's a little bit more bulk to it and it doesn't look so flat. You still want to get that dimension out of this, even though these lines are illustrated really thin and really fine. Plus, on the finished image, it helps cover up some of where that Copic from the background kind of bled into it. You're never going to notice. I do some of the stamen in this gray Stettler pen. I do end up bringing in a dark brown Stettler later to finish those off. And I also use a yellow Stettler to initially color in the balls on that stamen, but we'll talk about that more here in just a moment. I'm going to move on to these leaves for the pomegranates. Now keep in mind our pomegranates on the finished project are already colored. I'm coming in with the G29 and I'm going in where my darkest areas are going to be. There is no underpainting on these. I'm going in where that darkest area is going to be, and then I bring in that G24, blend out that G29 just a little bit. I am leaving some white paper because I'm going to go over the top of that with the YG21. Now, G29, G24, and YG21 are kind of a tough blend, folks. So what I do is I come back after my YG21 with that G24, and I blend that G29 back out in to that YG21 just a little bit more, and it works perfectly. So now I need to finish up the centers of my poinsettias. Again, remember on our original project, this poinsettia is already done. I'm coming in with a V12. I'm going in where my darkest shadow or shade is going to be. At this point, I'm using this V12 because I want to desaturate the shadow instead of saturating. Instead of adding deeper, bolder colors in a typical or traditional color blend, I'm going to use the complementary color of yellow, which is violet, to desaturate. Now I'm going to bring in that Y38. I'm going to go right over the top of that V12 and watch what happens. You can't tell at this point that I've used a purple underneath there. That Y38 now looks desaturated. So technically I've gotten 3 colors out of my primary color blend, which is actually a Y38 and a Y35. I go over that V12, bring it up just a little bit past that, and then I'm going to bring in that Y35. In real life, you can see that color variation between the desaturated Y38, the Y38, and Y35, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. This is still going to kind of look funny, but when I bring in the colored pencils, we're going to reinforce this desaturation and that level of yellows and oranges, and it's going to look great. Now I can start bringing in my colored pencils on all of my project. Everything is colored in. At this point, I am starting with the Prismacolor in dark purple. I can't say this enough. Sharp pencil, light hand. Over on Patreon, I said, if you're going to make a sign for your craft room, instead of hashtag all the glitter, you should make a sign that says hashtag light hand, sharp pencil, because legit, folks, I cannot say this enough. The sharper your pencil and the lighter your hand, the better off you are. I don't want these to look purple, so I don't need to go in with a heavy hand. I'm just reinforcing the depth and the shade within that, and I'm strictly sticking to any area that I had the BV23. I'm also going out in very light flicking motions. If flicking motions are tough for you and if it looks like you're leaving heavy streaks behind, then definitely go in with a light hand and very tight circular motion. You're still going to get the same effect. After the dark purple, I'm coming in with a Prismacolor Scarlet Lake. I'm going right over the top of that dark purple and extending that out just a little bit, just like we did with the BV23 and the R29. I don't need this to be heavy. I just need to reinforce some of those colors a little bit right here at the tip. I had that R29 going over the top of it with the Scarlet Lake. Really pushes that back a little bit further, gives me that color variation in this petal that I'm looking for, and it gives such a beautiful blend. Now at this point, I'm not going to add any other colors of colored pencils, but I am going to bring in a Pablo white colored pencil. I chose this one because it has the least opacity out of all the white colored pencils on the market. I don't need a stark white. I just need a little bit to reinforce a little bit of where that light would hit that petal because it is popping up towards us. And by adding that white to that, it really makes those petals look like they're coming up just a little bit more. If you go too heavy, you can go in very lightly with an eraser. That white eraser that I was using, I will have that link down below as well as over on my blog. You should definitely check that out. It is a lifesaver. It will help lift some of that. Now I'm going to finish off the inside of this poinsettia, and I'm coming in with Parma Violet. This is where I would have had that V12. I'm going in with a very light hand, and at this point it looks like we're reinforcing that purple. We are not. We are continuing to desaturate. Now I'm coming in with the mineral orange. I'm going right over the top of that mineral orange, going right over the top of that Parma Violet with the mineral orange, bringing it out just a little bit, and now it does look like a desaturated orange. Out of all of my color combinations that I use, this one is hands down my favorite. I love the effect of it. Totally worth having in your arsenal. It is handy and you can use it on all sorts of images. When I'm done with this mineral orange, I'm going to bring in a yellow ochre. I'm going to go right over the top of that Parma Violet and the mineral orange and bring that out just a little bit. I do have some of that Y35 peeking through on my Copic coloring with the colored pencils because I don't need to cover it all up. Now, some of these get kind of small and kind of tight in there, so it's kind of hard not to cover them all up. If you do, it's not a big deal, especially if you're going in with a super light hand. So now I want to finish off at these pomegranate. These are hands down my favorite out of this whole entire project. I love this. I'm coming in with the dark purple. This is going where I had that BV23 and I'm sticking strictly to that BV23 because I'm going to alter the colors just a little bit compared to my poinsettia. I need these pomegranate to read just a little bit more on the warm side where my poinsettia was a little bit on the cool side. So I'm going over the top of that dark purple with the poppy red, extending that up where I had that R17 just a little bit, not too much. At this point, we're just working on warming this up, folks. Now I'm going to bring in the lime peel. I'm going in where I had that YG03, and then I'm going to bring in the yellow ochre and go over the top of that YG03 and that the YG21. I'm sorry. Now at this point, this is definitely going to start making this look much, much more yellow, even though we're going over the top of a green. That is perfect. That is exactly what I want because, again, I am trying to warm these up. I'm also going to extend that yellow ochre down in to where I had the R14 on the pomegranate, and that's going to push it that much warmer. It's still going to read on the red side, but it's going to have that yellow tint like a pomegranate does have. And it's going to be so much warmer, and it's definitely going to complement the coolness in our poinsettia. You don't want to go too warm because we don't have a super blue flower, but you do want to warm it up just a wee bit. And I talk about that more over on Patreon. You should definitely go check that out. Now I need to finish up these pine and start making them look a little bit more dimensional, kind of soften them up a little bit. Now, typically pine, by definition, is not soft by any means. However, I don't want these to look super stark against this background and against the sharper edges of our poinsettia. So I need to just soften them just a tiny bit and make them look a little bit more full. I'm coming in with the Prismacolor in indigo blue, and I'm going right over the top of some of what I had done with that Stettler pen, also with that YG97, and I'm also flicking out into that background with the indigo blue. Now I'm bringing in the lime peel, going over the top of all of the indigo blue as well as some of that YG95 and blending that out. I am also adding extra flicks onto that background so it looks like there's a little bit more bulk and a little bit more movement, I suppose, going on within this pine. It doesn't look so flat. And I don't show you how I do all of these, but I pretty much repeat the same step on all of them so they all look cohesive and they all look like they're a part of the same image. Now I need to finish off my leaves on my pomegranate. I'm coming in with the indigo blue again. I'm going right over the top of that G29. This is where I cannot stress to you enough that you need to have a sharp pencil and a light hand. If you don't, folks, and if you don't blend out this indigo blue, when we come in with our Prussian green, green, you're going to have a very definite line between the indigo blue and the Prussian green. Now, going over the top of this with Prussian green is just going to make it look like a darker version of the Prussian green, and that's perfect. That's exactly what you want, but you don't want any harsh transitions between your blending on your colored pencils. It will stand out. You will see it and you won't like it. Now, if you watched my video last week, this is exactly the problem I had, and I could fix it. I just didn't fix it. So I was that much more mindful when I did it on this project. This was definitely not something that I wanted to start over, nor did I want to have to take the time to fix it. So pay attention to those blends, folks, and pay attention to how light you're holding that pencil and how much of that pigment you're putting down on the paper so you don't have to deal with it later. Okay, so after I was done with all of my indigo blue, now I'm bringing in that Prussian green. Again, I'm going over the top of the indigo blue, bringing that out just a little bit into that G24. I'm making sure that I don't cover up that YG21. I definitely want that to shine through. I need the yellows in these leaves to go along with the yellow that I have in those pomegranates. Now, I did use a photo reference on the pomegranates themselves, but I didn't use a photo reference on the leaves. So I'm just kind of going with the colors that I feel are going to look well with the pomegranates, but also I have that coolness of that poinsettia. So I'm really playing up the warmth in these pomegranates. You want a cohesive project, folks. You want the colors to all be cohesive at the end of the day. But if you use too many of with the same tone, the same warmth, same coolness, it's all going to run into each other and nothing is going to stand out. You're going to lose the effect of it. So I'm definitely playing up the extra warmth in these leaves as well as those pomegranates to get them to stand out against that poinsettia, but still look like they should be a part of the whole scenario here. And that is it, folks. We are done. We are good to go. I have more details and links down in the description below, as well as over on my blog. Don't forget, I have the full-length version of this over on Patreon. It is about an hour long, and I have tons of information, plus some bonuses to talk to you about in the video, so definitely go check that out. I hope you enjoyed my project today. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive all future notifications. Thanks again so much for stopping by. Until next time.